Thank you, PJ. It is time for another edition of the Pair and a Spare podcast. I'm Justin Gaard from The Fan. We've got Chip Scoggins from the Star Tribune, Ryan Burns from GopherIllustrated.com. We're presented, as always, by our friends at Jack's Cafe. And we already have a sound effect. Are you putting drops in here, Chip? What are we doing?
What I do?
I don't know what you did. You're typing. You're hitting buttons. Oh. You were coughing all over the place last week. We can't even get the intros out of the way, and you're already making auxiliary noises. What is going on over there?
I noticed some crumbs on my keyboard. So
Man,
I didn't know you guys. You heard that?
We can hear everything. Yes.
So can the listen. How's your cough, by the way? The amount of
my
text
cough is good.
I got about Chip having to figure out the mute button, not going forward.
Physically, I feel good. I had a peanut butter sandwich, and I noticed when I looked down that there was crumbs.
We're gonna have to start doing this in person again, just so that Chip can pull it together. Who knew that the technology would make it harder for all of this to happen? But here we are, and you know what? We're gonna give Chip a break, though, Burnsie, because it's been a tough 24 hours for the Scoggins family. I have 3 kids right over my head right now. I'm just praying they don't burn the house down while we do this. My wife is back at work this week as a teacher. This is, 2 weeks of just complete chaos with the state fair and Gopher football. But what Chip wouldn't give to have 3 little kids just waiting to run in and ruin this StreamYard call. You're officially empty nesters now, Chip. Is that can you confirm?
We are empty nesters. We dropped the youngest at Iowa State yesterday, got him moved into his dorm, and cried for the 3 hours on the way back up. But there's nothing. It's cliche, you hear it, but there is nothing that prepares you for that moment when you're pulling out of the parking lot and your kids waving to you, as you head on out and they go in the dorm. It's hard. It doesn't get easier. Like we were talking about it last night. Is like when you take them back for sophomore year, it's just like, all right, because they're all settled in, But it's like that first year with each kid, you can't not cry.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah. Luckily,
but he's happy. You
just get on 35 basically, and you don't have to make any turns. So you really didn't have to see anything. You could cry the whole way and just keep it straight. Right. I'm sure you've probably disabled the thing in your car that keeps you in the lanes because you don't trust technology. When you veer off, you don't trust that. But we're thinking of you. It's that time of year. My boss dropped his oldest off at college last week and said it was literally the hardest day of his whole life. So it's hard, as you know, for us in the middle of it right now. We are begging for school to start around here. Our kids are can't go 10 minutes without killing each other. They need school to start. We're in that age range where it's like school can start now. It's been a great summer. Time to go, but then we see all of you guys and we're like, oh geez, are we horrible parents?
Savor it.
Savor it. I know. Let them sleep in your bed forever, the whole bit. But it's that time of year. It's that time of year. And I thought it was nice though that Royce White, he basically offered to show him around and teach him the ropes of how to survive at Iowa State. The one place that he hasn't blown to smithereens is Iowa State somehow. So I thought that was nice that Royce White offered to take care of your kid, and that's a great role model down there. Hilton Magic, I think, is what they call it. So he should be in good shape.
I am looking forward to some Hilton. I've been in Hilton years and years ago when I was a college student covering Missouri in the old Big 8 when Hoiberg and Johnny Orr and Here Comes Johnny. That would have been, I think I was there in 93, but I haven't been back. My son's dorm is a short walk. I would say just a couple blocks from there. So nice. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. So
the only Hilton Magic I've ever taken part in, it was the In Sync concert in 2002 when I drove over from Iowa City with a friend of mine and checked out the In Sync concert in 2002.
Justin Gaard.
It was the earring phase. Absolutely. We hopped over from Iowa City to Ames. It was a different kind of Hilton Magic for your boy that night. checking out the In Sync concert and then firing back to Iowa City. But this is a college football podcast, so why don't we all just move on? We are a week and change away from the opening game, and Ryan Burns, because PJ Fleck and the Gopher football team won't, has released a depth chart, and
neither does North Carolina now because they're petty because they know that Minnesota won't release one, so they won't tell you who their starting quarterback is or what their depth chart looks like because we're all so
how many schools have done that? How many schools have done that in response to PJ not doing a depth chart? Because there's a couple I know that have pulled
There's
the depth
a couple
chart
every year, but it's only a couple.
Yeah.
I thought PJ was in response to Michigan not doing it originally. Like there was a time where he did release one, and then something happened where he didn't. And it's, like we said last week, and we're going to get to the injury report that Burnsie was waiting for. It's college with the the fewer and fewer things that college coaches can control these days. They take every inch and every ounce that they possibly can to say we have somewhat of a control over what's going on with our football program. And so, people are being very loud about it on the other side, like North Carolina, for example, saying direct response, like Minnesota's not doing it, we're not doing it. So nobody wins, nobody loses. It's just another day in the stupidity of college football.
I don't know. I guess I don't understand the logic behind not doing it, right? Because they have a depth chart internally. They know what it is. I don't.
Of course, they just don't want anybody to know anything. They want, which is whatever. Yeah. They must say they must think it makes a difference.
I don't understand the competitive edge. I assume that's what they think.
Of course,
I wonder if it's for PJ not having to deal with player parents about why isn't my kid.
Could be that.
That's not bad. That's actually, I think you're onto something there, Burnsie. That is because when
they're gonna know,
yeah,
the parents are gonna know. They're gonna know when the kid's not playing where he is on the depth chart. Or
well, you guys know, like I do, player parents have never been as bad. I swear, every year it gets worse and worse with little Johnny and Joe getting quote unquote disrespected in some way, and I wonder if that's what it is. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's stupid, but I think it's truly been since like 2018, 2019.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while since he hasn't done it.
But I remember that this wasn't a thing from day one with him.
No.
It was something he changed. Yeah. Burnsie, along those lines, you think is it because of the money parents are investing now in these private camps and stuff? You think that's more that way?
Why they're as grumpy as me now?
Why everyone's crazy? Yeah, the financial ramifications of the money that they've invested in, as you said, Johnny, Joey, and Jilly, their entire life, and they want to see it pay off.
I mean, you got the scholarship, so that was the whole part about the high school that you always hear that they're trying to get the scholarship, but when you get to college, it's like
I don't know what
you got the scholarship. Yeah,
you guys would be able to tell me more considering your parents, and I'm not. I would just say. I think so much of this is becoming specialized from such an early age now. And I think that it's just people trying to make money off parents who are in middle school, their kids are, or even early high school. As someone who talks to college coaches essentially every day of their life, no one is looking at your son until they're a sophomore at the earliest in high school. Let them have fun. Let them go do whatever the heck they want. They don't need to be going to get these private workout sessions that early on. It's just maybe it's that way. I don't know. You guys tell me why. I just feel like between coaches and referees, there's a reason those guys are now or gals are in such short supply now is because nobody wants to deal with parents.
No, that's true. It's 100% true. There's a reason why they're playing high school football games on Wednesday night every week because of the referee shortages, and basketball, same bit. I know. And until people internally, other parents stop other parents, it's never going to stop. But it's hard. I mean, Chip, you've been through the youth system, the travel system. I haven't yet. I'm dreading it with stories that I've already heard from the last couple of years. Oh, second Royce White reference. Stories that I've already heard, from what's happening at these gyms and what's happening with these refs and all these things. I'm already dreading it. As someone who played in it myself here in the state, as it was kind of getting to the point where parents were exerting more control and boards and all that stuff. Yeah, I think it is just we pay a lot of money. You want your kid to have a chance at
that's what
not even a scholarship. I don't even think it's that so much. You just want them to be
chance
able
to play varsity,
be in the mix, and have a good experience and do all of that. And it's never been harder. It's never been harder. So that's a whole separate 5-hour podcast.
Well, that is, I mean, we could do a lecture series on that, And I have been through it and I've seen it. And luckily, as a youth coach, I can tell you I had great parents. I didn't have to deal with some of the things that coaches deal with. So I was fortunate and that is my one thing. I was thinking about that today as an empty nester, and seeing these kids that I coach go off to college. If there's young parents with young kids in here, get involved in coaching. I know you hear the horror stories and all that. You won't be disappointed. I promise you. Get involved in coaching.
All right, there's the Chip Scoggins lesson.
There's my plug. Yeah.
From as he thought about it in Tipton, Iowa yesterday as he was driving down on Highway 35. So Burnsie, you do a depth chart though. I'm curious. We've talked kind of through a lot of different things the last couple of weeks. We talked about the question marks, who's going to be, backup running back, who's going to be wide receiver. I'll frame it to you this way. What was the hardest call as you put together the Ryan Burns depth chart, offense, defense, whatever, where you thought, as a guy who's seen, 3 practices, which I know you're excited about,
yep.
And to obviously talk to some people in the building because you've got great sources. What was the hardest call or two as you put together your initial depth chart?
I think it was defensively because Flex talked about it. Corey Heatherman talked about it earlier this week. They are going to be rotating a ton. I don't know that the term starter really matters at places like defensive line or safety. Safety by far to me is the most wide open. I don't know what I'm going to see there. I could see one of 6 names, I think. And Coy Parrish, Chip's boy among them. I know that. Look at him bright. Look at that. Look at that face. Look at him getting all happy and smiling.
It's almost like his kids just walked back in the house and they're all coming for another year with that kind of fatherly gaze.
Is that a good or bad thing that you have 6 guys that you don't know who's going to play?
I think it's like an assortment of things where Darius Green finally returned for that last practice. Yeah. That was the first time I've seen him practice in pads in 2024, which is considering he played 700 snaps, more or less. I think, or is it 500? Either way, played a ton of snaps last fall. But what are you going to get from him because he's been injured? Coy Parrish has only been here 2-3 months, and he was injured for the first month. And then you got a bunch of guys that just haven't played a lot of football. Yeah. I mean, to me, the biggest question mark I have on the entire team is still that safety spot from both consistency plus I asked Corey Heatherman this at the press conference earlier this week. Who are your playmakers in the back 7?
Mm-hmm.
Because Newbin masked a lot of things last year, and that's why he ends up leaving as the all-time leader in interceptions. But you're going to need multiple guys on the back end to step up, make plays, force turnovers, whether it's force fumbles or interceptions. And I don't know who those guys are still going to be. So I have a lot of questions about how many guys are going to play defensively, but you could see 8 guys on the defensive line. You could see 4 or 5 linebackers, and you could see 4, maybe 5 safeties back there. Now, to your point, I hope by the Iowa game, a lot of these rotations have hopefully tightened up because guys have earned it. Other guys, maybe the moment is too big for. But defensively, I'm still scratching my head at some of these spots thinking, what are they going to do against North Carolina just a week and change?
It is interesting that they always seem to have had a safety. I mean, going back to, Cedric Thompson, I'm thinking about back there. I mean, they've had guys that, and obviously Winfield just became the highest paid safety ever, or defensive back, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And Newbin did what Newbin does.
Even Jordan Howden.
Jordan Howden's a great example. Yeah. And that's a guy who, he used to hate the development story, but we all remember his freshman year.
Or even Newbin's early time, like all these guys. And that's where I'm worried that this is going to be the early years of whoever the next NFL guy is going to be. Even if it's Coy Parrish, he's still a true freshman, folks.
Right.
Yeah.
He's going to make mistakes. A lot of these guys are just inexperienced. And that's my worry is you're going to see the early years of whoever the next NFL guy is. And that's not always linear in terms of how their progress goes, Chip.
No, it's not linear. I mean, you're going to see some youthful mistakes, I would think. It's interesting. I read the quotes from PJ. Do you think so much of that is that they have recruited well, and so there's more competition, or that there just hasn't been a guy or two that has stepped up and really taken hold of that job?
I think both things are true. I think they've recruited well there, but I also think they want to see what it looks like over these first 3 games when the bullets fly, when the lights are on. Who steps up? Who is the moment too bright for? And that's where I think you're going to see so many players. I mean, there's only 11 on the field at one time, but when you look at the participation report at the end of the day, I think in that North Carolina game, you could be close to 20 guys that are rotating in because you're trying to learn who's ready and who's not. And I hope eventually, especially at a place like safety, like I said, you go from 6 guys to maybe 4 guys to maybe as you get in to that first bye week after UCLA, it gets even tighter. But they just have a lot to learn in terms of, because there's no preseason games, because you really don't know outside of scrimmages. And you two know, like I do, they're tired of hitting the maroon or gold colored jersey across from them at this point.
Yep.
What it all looks like.
Well, when you're talking about defensive line, that's a good problem. I don't even know if it's a problem that you need those guys. I mean, you need to be able to roll guys in, and they've been able to do that, I think, right? In flex
they rotated
times.
8. I tell you, I feel really good about the first 4 or 5, about as good as you can feel about a Gopher defensive line between Jaw Joyner, Devin Eastern, Anthony Smith, Jalen Logan Redding, and Danny Strigow. That's a pretty good 1 through 5. It's a pretty experienced and talented 1 through 5. My question is, what's 6 through 8 look like?
Yeah.
I've seen the bodies, and I'm a little skeptical on, Jackson Howard is a redshirt freshman, or Lucas Finnessy, or Logan Richter, who is Chip's favorite Perham athlete. Like, they're very top heavy at the defensive line, and that's a spot they cannot afford injuries.
What about secondary? Because secondary cornerback specifically. We all know about Justin Wally. Jack Henderson is in the mix too, is like kind of a nickel guy. I thought losing him for a couple of games last year hurt too as well. What are they? I know they took a couple of transfers. Burnsie, what are we hearing about who's going to be on the field with Mr. Mississippi Justin Wally?
Yeah, they're as experienced as you're going to find at corner and nickel, especially on early downs. Justin Wally's almost got 2,000 snaps of experience. Ethan Robinson, who they took from Bucknell, has almost 2,000 snaps of experience. Now it's at the FCS level, but now between Southeastern Louisiana and Minnesota, Mr. Gumbo himself, Jack Henderson, who people remember had the interception against Drake May last year, has nearly 2,000. Like, they're very experienced there, and that should be honestly one of the strengths of that defense if they're healthy. But to your point, it's behind them.
Who's
behind them at corner? Zaquan Bryan is a redshirt freshman.
Yeah.
Rylan Kelly is a redshirt sophomore. They're just not very experienced there. That's the theme of this defense to me, is they have the potential to be pretty good, but they also have the potential to not be so good if they're having to throw so many of these bodies out there for the first time. Now, whether that happens this year or next year when so many of these guys will be graduated and off, I feel pretty good about it. Or even behind Jack Henderson is the Minnehaha kid, Craig McDonald. So you have some experience there at the Big 12 and the SEC, but they got to stay healthy defensively if this thing is going to go from the worst run defense in the Big 10 to average.
What do you think they did?
Go ahead, Burnsie.
What do you think they did to shore up that run defense? Is it just getting more bodies, bigger bodies in there along the line? Is it, you think they did anything schematically with Heatherman?
We'll find out. It's tough to say because I know I love to.
We don't see practice. Yeah.
Well, I've only seen one practice essentially in the last 8 months where they tackled anybody to the ground. Yeah. And when you're going to thud or you're touching them off, you don't know if it would have been a tackle. You don't know if they would have just blown through it. But I think it comes down to the guys up front. They have to get more penetration in the backfield. They got to be able to hold their gaps to allow hopefully someone like Cody Lindenberg, who when you miss 80% of the season and then you don't have Donald Willis and Braylon Oliver behind you because they hit the portal. Now you retained everybody who played last year at linebacker. But to me, it comes down to the guys up front. That's going to determine this defense. You got to be able to stop the run. And if you're going to do that, you better be able to set an edge on the outside, and your defensive tackles better be able to cause some havoc on the internal. But Cody Lindenberg and those linebackers, I mean, they missed a lot of tackles last year. I think Maverick Baranowski, Lindenberg, and Devin Williams, when you look at the Pro Football Focus stuff, were all missed double-digit tackles last year. When you have the opportunity to make the play to make it 2nd and 8, you better make it, or else it's going to be a first down.
Yeah.
Could be a good barometer, I guess, North Carolina, and we've talked a little bit about them. We'll talk a little bit about them on this pod and next week as well as we get ready for the opener. But the fact that they're clearly going to be a run-first team at the moment, right, with Amarian Hampton, who's like preseason All-American, 72% of their yards, I think, a year ago. Like, I think we'll know a lot about the ability of this team to stop the run just from the opener, will we not?
I mean, in theory, but then you go back to, they were terrible, Minnesota was against the run last year. They eventually were October, November. That North Carolina game, Omarion Hampton went something like 41 yards on 13 carries, and their other tailback, British Brooks, didn't do much as well. Minnesota stopped the run in that game. It's just Drake May had 450 total yards.
It felt like he converted like a dozen 3rd and 8 passes in that game.
Oh, he did.
I mean, their 3rd down percentage was ridiculous.
They were 12 of 17 on 3rd down last year.
Not that you remember
and they weren't
it.
short. And they weren't short 3rd downs either. They were, passing 3rd downs.
Which is also part of why Minnesota was a bad defense. They were the worst 3rd down defense in the Big Ten as well. So a lot of this comes down to Gaardsy's point. If you can stop Omarion Hampton and make it 2nd and 3rd and long for Max Johnson, I know he's played a lot of football, but this is also a North Carolina offensive line that is replacing 4 starters.
Right.
So this is all, as much as it is just a barometer check for what Minnesota's defense is going to be. Winston DeLatte-Baudaire's group on the defensive line, this is your time to shine. If you are going to be as good as what Fleck thinks you're going to be, and Fleck said, I think a couple of different times, including at Big Ten Media Days, that this is the most talented group he believes he's had here. I mean, I think back to that, was it 2021 or 2019 when I think it was 21, where you had Assezi, you had Boye Mafe, you had some guys, Niles Pinckney.
Yeah.
Now you better play like that. And this is going to be a good barometer test for them for an offensive line that's replacing a lot of guys.
Flipping to offense quickly, really the one wild card I saw from your depth chart is Donald Driver's kid, right? Christian.
Yeah.
Like, we talk a lot about the injuries to Darius Taylor, obviously Daniel Jackson, but Driver's been pretty much banged up the whole time. Essentially, he's had a couple of flashes here, as you wrote about, but how important could he potentially be as they try to find people to continue to throw the ball to? And do we think he's going to be ready for the opener or beyond?
I think he'll be ready. I think he'll be healthy. I'll say this. I think he's going to have the season that I think a lot of people thought Georgia transfer Tyler Williams was going to have when they.
I noticed he wasn't really featured prominently in the Ryan Burns depth chart.
He wasn't, and we'll see if that comes to fruition. But from what I've heard behind the scenes, he's still pretty raw. He's probably still a year away, and that's where Driver, when he's been healthy here in the spring and in the fall, you talked to some people within that building. He's been making explosive plays left and right. And Chip, what's one thing with this passing game that they need help in desperately?
Explosive plays. And the one day we all three were there, the second open practice, he got a ton of work.
Yes,
he was the one guy that really stood out amongst the receivers that day. Obviously, Jackson wasn't practicing, but he looked like, to me, if you have the 3 guys that are returning, Driver was the 4th guy in that group, along with him, that looks like that he's going to be part of their main rotation. So yeah, they need him, to be able. Well, they need somebody to be able to take some pressure off of Daniel Jackson, because he's going to draw the best corner, the most coverage. So whether it's Driver or Lemecki or whoever, Elijah, they need some guys to step up, and so it just they're not trying to force feed the ball to Daniel Jackson.
They just need as many options as they possibly can have,
yes.
right? They need variety, they need multiplicity, they need consistency from a couple of other people. How are we feeling, Burnsie, about Elijah Spencer, who did not capitalize on what was a really good year at Charlotte, right? And they were excited about bringing him in. Had a good spring game. I remember he had a good spring game last year when we were inside. They actually did one, and had a lot of catches. It looked like I thought he was going to play pretty well. Obviously did not. So what are we hearing about him? Because he did make the Ryan Burns too deep.
He did. I first asked, can you hear my Mastiff going crazy in the background?
I do hear him, yeah.
We can, but we're pros. We just moved.
And you're talking about me wiping my crumbs off my keyboard.
I can't exactly go. He's a floor below going ballistic at the mailman.
Yeah.
Poor mailman. But I think the thing for Elijah Spencer here this fall has been consistency with catching the football. It's been a lot better. It's been a lot more like he was at Charlotte. And I'd argue if there's going to be one guy to take the pressure off of Daniel Jackson, it's going to be Spencer. We've seen it before at Charlotte. It went about as pear-shaped as it could possibly be last fall with single-digit catches. And I think even from talking to him in July, I think what he learned last fall was everybody at Minnesota is a professional compared to at Charlotte. Everybody is taking this a lot more seriously than maybe when you could just show up and be the guy. And I'm not saying that maybe he took some plays off or anything like that, but I think he figured out that if you're going to be in Matt Simon's wide receiver rotation consistently, you have to bring it consistently every day. And I think they've been a lot happier with what they've seen here in the last 8 months. But ultimately, he's got to show it on Thursdays and Saturdays. But If you ask me today, I think it's Brockington, I think it's Spencer, and I think it's Jackson that take that field on the initial 3 wide receiver set. But don't sleep on Christian Driver he is someone that adds a little bit of speed, suddenness, something that they kind of don't have outside of Daniel Jackson there. And even Daniel Jackson, folks, I don't know. He hasn't practiced in a couple of weeks now. From what I understand, he's going to be ready to go for North Carolina, but it's not great when your all Big Ten receiver is trying to get as healthy as humanly possible just a week out.
So did it put you right back in the same spot emotionally that you are during the season, Burnsie, or was it like, just take me through your emotions? We said this was going to happen last week. PJ was going to have his press conference. I think I called it verbatim. He was going to say, when asked about Darius Taylor and Daniel Jackson,
right,
we'll have the availability report 2 hours before the game.
2 hours before.
That's what we're going to know. Did he look over at General Manager Garrett Chernoff? Did he look over at SID Paul Rovnak and give a wink and a nod as he did it? Or did you just black out at that point because you were so bitter about it?
Oh, he gets this sly grin on his face. And he makes eye contact with Garrett, but you had to ask the question because we have to, but you knew what the answer was going to be. So it's one of those self-fulfilling prophecies. I'd say this. I think Darius is a lot closer to a 50-50 shot than a lot of people do. I do anticipate him to practice this week if he hasn't already. Now, in what capacity and what is he doing? That's the question. And then it also becomes, you don't need him to beat Nevada and Rhode Island.
Right.
You don't. So do you want to maybe push him a little bit more to get back for 20 snaps in this game where you can give him 15 carries, knowing that you can then rest him the next 2 weeks to get ready for Iowa? I think there's a lot of discussions that have to be had between PJ, the trainers, Darius Taylor yet, but I'm optimistic that this is not, a long-term thing. And I know a lot of listeners are like, well, Ryan, Cody Lindenberg last year, what do you mean? Or Darius. So many of these injuries, you guys know, like I do, they're their own thing. They're not, the transitive property doesn't apply to football like it doesn't apply to so many things in life. So I think he's going to have a shot to play. Will he end up playing? I have no idea. Do I expect him to be listed as out or in on the injury report that comes out 2 hours ahead of time? I think they'll list him as questionable to screw with North Carolina up until the opening kick. I think he'll be dressed. Now, whether he plays or not, we'll find out. But I think they avoided long-term ramifications with it, but we'll find out.
Yeah, and it is about – he just needs to be as ready for as many games as possible this year. I know it's a buzzkill to think about him not being there for North Carolina because I think it's a big swing game and how the whole season can potentially be viewed, certainly that first month. But you got to find a way. He's got to be on the field against Iowa, man. He's got to be on the field against Michigan. He's got to be on the field against USC, UCLA when they get into the meat of that Big Ten schedule. That's where he's just got to be on the field.
Well, and you've seen that injury you rush back from. Now you're talking about something longer. You talk about something that's going to linger. So, getting him right for Iowa and the Big Ten is the most important thing. But it's a bummer because you see how different they are when he's in there. I mean, that guy is just a special talent. And so,
at least last year, especially in November, when it was like you're leaning on Jordan Newbin, who 12 months prior to that hadn't even been a running back, and then you gave him 40 carries, and then his body wasn't ready for that, and then he had nobody else to go to, and that's where the hope would be if Darius cannot go for this game. That's where Marcus Major and C.A. Bangura and Jordan Newbin and Jared Mangum and maybe even true freshman by the name of Femi Ijiboy, who has gotten a lot of steam here from Fleck and Harbaugh in the last week or so. I mean, that you can have some adequate options to lean on. I think the thing I would say is I think you're going to see a pair and a spare. I think they've listened to the podcast enough to where you're going to see them give 3 guys carries and not just lean on one. Now, I know a lot of people are skeptical of that, and I know a lot of people will say, Fleck is just going to run whoever it is into the ground like he has the previous years. I also would say their actions would tell you that they're not going to with how many transfer guys that they added.
Yeah.
So we'll see what comes to fruition. We'll see who's actually healthy. But I think in an ideal world for them, I would say the plan going into the season is they give 3 running backs per game an opportunity to stay fresh, and then they'll ride whoever in the fourth quarter has played the best that day.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to see Marcus Major in a game because the one practice we got to see, and he didn't really go through anything, but you look at his body type. I mean, he looks like a big running back that has some, physical talent, with him. He's been in a marquee program. And so why would you bring a guy like that into your program if you're not going to use him? I mean, I know Darius Taylor's a all Big Ten caliber running back, but, if you're getting that kind of transfer to come in, it would behoove you to spread those carries around. And I tend to think they will. I mean, obviously Mo was a different type of guy. You could give him the ball, as much as you wanted. You would think that PJ has understood that, okay, that doesn't exist anymore in his team. Like, they have to spread these carries around.
Even
go ahead.
With Rodney and Shannon and a young Mo,
that's what I was going to say. Yes. They didn't, when Mo was really going late in his career, they didn't have the pair and a spare as much.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Trey Potts was not the Trey Potts that he was as a true freshman, right? After his situation, or Jerry Kill always used to say situation. After his situation, Trey Potts wasn't that. Obviously, Bucky and Kai Thomas were gone because those two, got a lot of carries together as we were going. So, but when Mo was moving along, they didn't really have the spare part of it. So we've seen, I mean, Chip, you're the Barber and Maroney bit, right? Gary Russell, like Amir Pinnock, like they've always had a few, and they've always, when they've been really successful, they've always mixed in a few.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and that's, I mean, because I when you look at, his the recruiting, all the guys, what he wants to do. I mean, that's PJ knows that. He knows he can't just rely on Darius Taylor. As tempting as it is to give Darius Taylor the ball, as many times as you can. I mean, this is a guy who's dealt with injuries now for 2 straight seasons, and that type of model is just not going to work. And Marcus Major, I mean, I think he gives him a different kind of. He looks bigger, Burnsie. He looks like a 220-pound running back.
But he's more east-west to Darius Taylor's north-south.
Yeah, and so he gives you a different kind of running style, and so I like that. I mean, when you go back, you mentioned Barber and Roney, we had different running styles there.
Yep.
I mean, that plays with the defense too. When you have, you can hit him with one thing and come back with another guy. So, I think that rotation will look different. Hopefully, Darius Taylor, it's not something that lingers too much, and that when they are healthy, you would like it to be a 18 carry for Darius Taylor, 10 to 12 for Major, maybe someone else coming in getting, spare. Some guy comes in and gets a series, gets a series in the second quarter, something like that. I mean, I think that could be effective for him.
With Max Brosmer throwing 24 times, at least.
Hey,
right?
Hey, no, I think he breaks Tanner's record.
I know you've said that. We get every show, we know it was your number one bold prediction too, right? I think it was. I skimmed your bold predictions.
What would you have the average to break it? How many attempts per game?
All he would have to do is throw 25 passes a game for 13 games. That's all he has to do. Chip, we've lamented on this since the birth of this show, the passing offense and their unwillingness to throw the football. I mean, Brosmer's thrown it 420 plus times the last 2 years. He's not going to do that here. But if he threw the ball 375 times this fall, which Tanner's record, I believe, is 318, which was back in that 2019 season, all he has to do is throw it 27 times a game. And considering the amount of close games that they're going to be in, or they're projected to be in at least, you can't just rely on the running game. And so that's where the hope would be over this first month, that he doesn't have an Ethan type of campaign where he struggles against the opener. And then in that third, fourth game of the season, like, again, remember back to the North Carolina game last year where Ethan went 13 of 31.
I remember it.
That's where you saw the reins start to be pulled back on the passing offense. And so the hope would be, from what they've seen in fall camp, that they can get this passing offense to at least be average in passing attempts.
Well, it's interesting, and I know PJ is always going to be one to paint the rosy picture and pump guys up, but both he and Harbaugh have not done anything to dissuade expectations with their quarterback. If anything, they've doubled down on it and talked about this guy's changed the program. He's done this. This before he's even played a game. I mean, I was looking at both of their quotes from their last media session. It's like,
yeah,
I mean, the bar, they have definitely raised the bar on what people should expect out of Max Brosner. So we'll see what it does, but they haven't exactly tempered expectations for him.
And that's where I think one of the things I want to see from the quarterback this year versus last year, Ethan was really good in the first half, and then his play dropped off precipitously in the second half. Now, this year, the thing I'll be curious about is, does Brosmer get a little bit better as the game goes on? Because in theory, I mean, as someone who has been at those press conferences, listened to them, I mean, they continue to talk up his intelligence, his ability to understand what the defense is giving him. So as in the second half, when you're seeing a lot more adjustments to whatever happened in the previous 30 minutes, the hope would be that Brosmer has more comprehension about what the defense is trying to do to him compared to maybe some of the previous Gopher quarterbacks. Now, it also helps that whoever is getting the handoff, or Max Brosmer dropping back to pass, I think this has the potential to be Fleck's best offensive line too.
Right.
Between Ursery at left tackle, who's going to be a top 60 overall pick. You look at the guards in Carroll and Cooper, who I know Dane Brugler, who I have a lot of respect for the athletic and NFL draft guy, had both his top 20 interior offensive line prospects. So you're talking about potential draftable grades. I mean, I think back to that 22 offensive line where you had Chuck Filiaga and Axel Rushmeyer end up as all Big Ten guys at the guard spots. And that was Ursery's also first year at left tackle. I mean, I think they have the potential to be pretty good up front. And so that's where the hope would be. Protection's a little bit better. They're able to potentially open some more holes for whoever that is up front. But I do think, if you ask me what I think today is the strength of the team, just in general, position group wise, I think it's offensive line.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, and they've shown they know how to scheme it too, right? I mean, you talk to offensive line coaches and offensive coordinators, and they'll say, because it's not like they're doing a lot of exotic stuff all the time.
No.
Right? But they still find different ways. Historically, last year is kind of the aberration in this thing. Historically, no matter who was running the ball, whether it was one of the kids that we talked about or Mo Ibrahim, like they find different ways as the game goes on to scheme it up too. So I think we should have a lot of faith in that group. I think Callahan's proven it too. Just the guys that he continues to develop and find and put into the NFL and put into the NFL conversation. It is a really good place to start. I think you're spot on about that.
No, I mean, I think I said it last week that I know we talk about the run defense and defense line, had to be better there, but I feel like their two lines are, if you ask me what the strength of this team is, I'd say their line play, and that's both offense and defense. Yeah.
And if they are, they're going to make the preseason win total look, not. It's fascinating to me because there is a disconnect between that Vegas number, which opened at 4.5, which was the lowest of any Big Ten team. Now I think it's up to 5 or 5.5, or even today, the Senior Bowl released their watch list. There's 11 Gophers on there. There's a disconnect between reality and what is actually going to come to fruition, because I mean, I'm going to write about it for Thursday when my season prediction comes out. I mean, tell me where I'm wrong here. I have between 4-8 and 8-4, all at double-digit percentiles. Nothing would shock me. I have none of these say between 4-8 and 8-4 as a higher than 30% chance of happening, because there's so many teams on this schedule, and I call them 8 coin flip games. Yeah, for Minnesota, where they're going to be plus or minus a touchdown. If you go 2-6 in those, boy, it's going to be not a great season. You go 5-3, 6-2 in those, we're going to be in a warm destination, and we're going to be able to get Chip Scoggins to a bowl game, hopefully.
No, don't be crazy. Don't be crazy. The only one he's going to is Music City, if that ever happens. Music City, he'll do everything he can.
Would you come to the Charlotte bowl game, Chipper?
No.
Come on. It's like January 3rd, I think.
It is. You got nothing going on January 3rd?
Yeah, you don't need to be at the Vikings-Lions game on January 4th. You don't need to do that.
For the 4-13 Vikings taking on whatever the Lions are.
We do always talk about it though, and it's when you do the game predictions and what's the record going to be.
Right.
Like I always go back. Just let's take, speaking of warm bowl destinations, let's take the Outback Bowl season and the Citrus Bowl season. They were 8-4 and then 10-2, right? And I think about that 8-4 season. They needed the Breein-Body Calhoun play against Nebraska. They needed Mitch Leidner to just drop a complete dime to KJ May on the drive before. Yeah. They needed a kickoff return against Northwestern in the fourth quarter to win that game. They needed a 53-yard field goal to walk off Purdue at the buzzer by your guy, Burnsie, Ryan Santoso, who's continuing to kick.
Case Florida legend Ryan Santoso.
So that's that season. 2019, you needed 4th and 13. Yeah. Tanner Morgan to Chris Ottman Bell.
South Dakota State was a grind.
Yeah. They were trailing in the fourth quarter. That was the infamous chip at the State Fair coming up on Friday and going, what was that? I go, I don't know. That was Georgia Southern 3rd and 30, right? With the Demetrius Douglas bit. Like my point in all of this is everything that we just talked about. We've been recording for literally 41 minutes from Mark. All of this is going to come down to like 7 plays.
It is.
And that's why college coaches don't release a depth chart. That's why college coaches have binoculars all over their building. That's why college coaches go crazy, because 2 of the best years in program history, the 2 January 1 bowl games in the last 60 years, I just gave you the 7 plays that define. If any of those go the other way, we might be talking about a Music City Bowl that Chip hung out at. We might be talking about, a 4th guaranteed rate bowl. Like that is the margin for all of this. And so, buckle up, because as Burnsie said, there's about 8 of those games that are going to be in that wheelhouse.
Well, that's why I think PJ's program's kind of built that way, that they're going to be in a lot of these close games, because it's just how they are. It's how,
Yep. It's how Iowa usually is.
How all these teams. And so it's in that way, it's sort of kind of like the NFL, where it's like, really, are you going to they're all kind of bunched together, and it's just like, who's going to make that game deciding play in the 2-minute or whatever that's going to, be the tipping point for you. But, as you're talking about that, Burnsie, is like, I feel like I need to see a lot of teams in the big, like I can say, okay, Ohio State, they're going to be really good, right? Mm-hmm. Oregon, they're going to be, Penn State's going to be, but there's just a bunch of teams together. Like, you need to see them play, like what they are, try to figure out who they are, what the quarterback looks like, how, I just don't have a good feel for the Gophers and about 10 other Big Ten teams, like to say, you know what, when they go to Illinois, I just can't sit here and say that. Like,
well, me and everybody in between, and so much of it comes down to the quarterback position.
Yeah.
Minnesota's got a brand new one. And I looked at the schedule. There are 10 teams that are going to have different quarterbacks than what they had last year. Now, I'm counting Iowa as part of that 10, because we'll see if Cade McNamara is back. Minnesota didn't see him, or if it's Brendan Sullivan. But so many of these teams have a brand new quarterback with a brand new offensive coordinator, and it's the most important position in sports. Who's good? Who's not? I can tell you what they've done at their previous stops, but how are they going to look with a new offensive coordinator, new skill position players, an adjustment in level, whatever it may be? That's why it's so difficult to do. That's why I don't know there's just so many of these games. I don't know who is going to be good. I even think about that stretch between the byes this year for Minnesota, that Maryland, Rutgers, which I cannot tell you, Justin.
Oh boy, yeah, I know.
Here we go.
And Illinois, where if you go 3-0, which you plausibly can, you're going to be in a great spot for a warm bowl game. You go 0-3, you're going to be sweating to even get to a bowl game. It's probably not even going to get there. And I can plausibly tell you can win or lose any one of those games.
But the thing is, Rutgers, he's recruited well, right? They're kind of they have momentum with their recruiting.
And they have a very manageable schedule. They have they're going to be feeling good about themselves.
Linebacker yesterday to a torn ACL. And
oh, really?
Yeah, he's led them in sacks whenever he's played the last 3-4 seasons, he's led them in sacks, and they lost him to a torn ACL. Plus, their other preseason stud linebacker is recovering from an Achilles injury, and he might not play to start the season. But yes, so many of these teams, so many of these games, including the opener on Thursday, it's not going to shock us anyway. And that's where even last season, you needed the Daniel Jackson toe tap to the Cooper DeJean invalid signal. And then you saw it on the flip side with the Northwestern and Illinois debacles. It all comes down to, can Max Brosmer be consistent? Can he be the quarterback you think? And then why they struggled so much last year too, boys. They couldn't finish a football game to save their life, more or less.
Yeah, right.
Anytime they got in a tight Big Ten game down the stretch, they just imploded. So can they be able to put a game away? I don't know. But there's so many games on this schedule where I think that's part of the fun this year is teams 7 through 16 in the Big Ten. There's going to be a giant conglomerate of them between 8-4 and 4-8. But your guess is as good as mine how they end up shaking out.
Well, that's the thing too. Like with the new format, and before it's like, well, Big Ten West, they're playing these teams. Probably these two are going to be bad. These will be kind of comparable. Like I don't think UCLA is a good team, obviously, but I mean you're adding USC to the schedule now, so you just have this this feeling of newness to me. Like with the Big Ten, like there's so much new about it and uncertainty that you go into it like really not sure what the heck how this thing's going to unfold. Other than the top teams, we kind of know if they're going to be really good. But I wouldn't be surprised if a team kind of comes out of nowhere that they hit right on the quarterback, and and they play they put it together. So this is going to be one of the I think funnest and in terms of anticipation for me seasons going into it, because you just don't really have a great feel for what's going to happen.
We're going to be learning a lot. We'll be learning a lot on a week-to-week basis. By the way, get-in price for Gophers, North Carolina, $30. State Fair special, I saw. State Fair special, which here in Minnesota starts tomorrow as we record this on a Wednesday. The get-in price is $30. The Thursday night game's always fun. Always fun to hang out on a Thursday night, primetime, Fox Crew, the whole bit. Burnsie's joining me on the pregame show right outside of 3M at Mariucci. I'm sure I'll be taking pictures of Burnsie and all his adoring fans. But the get-in price is $30, gophersports.com there. Speaking of the business of college sports, when we come back, we're going to talk about a couple of things that caught our eye, and the times are changing for sure. Want to pause, though, and thank our great partner at Jack's Cafe, jackscafe.com. Season 3 with the Minneapolis institution being a sponsor of the podcast. Burnsie just popped over there a couple of weeks ago. Chip, now that you're empty nesters,
I know
you've got your date night schedule. 25 years, right, that you've been married. I think we saw that post this year as well. So, I mean, you could do a weekly, Scoggins family date night at Jack's Cafe. And the best part is, where you're going to park every single time.
That's right. I was thinking about that. Like, my wife and I kind of are down in the dumps. What better way to cheer her up than to take her to Jack's, right? Let's go have a nice dinner. Let's spend what little money we have left after college.
I was going to say, the college tuition, you might want to use a gift card. Hopefully we can get a gift card out of this deal.
Get it for Bill, yeah. But, I mean, that would put my wife in a good mood. To take her out to a nice dinner, right? Roll right into the parking lot. I'm not grumpy because I can't find a parking spot. Plenty of, that puts me in a good mood. We go up there, sit out on the patio, drown our sorrow in a nice drink, and then have a good steak or walleye. The walleye is excellent. I love the walleye there, but that's a good idea. Yeah,
stare at the bubbling brook in the back patio and just think about life. And as the water's rolling down, it's like the seasons of your life, Chip, just going there. But Jax can tell you though that family roots run deep, right? I mean, it's been a family-run business basically since 1910. The bar opened in 1933 after Prohibition, but the spot where Jack's Cafe has been around for over 100 years, and so it's a new season for the Scoggins family, but everything, it all works together, and you can do it at Jack's Cafe.
That's right.
Anything you want to add to this, Burnsy? It's probably the best commercial we've ever done.
It's up there. It certainly is.
It's probably the best commercial we've ever done.
Whether it's watching Chip get some creme brulee out on the patio for date night, or if you just want to hop over there with some of your buddies and go sit at the bar. Go talk to those lovely people. I love the Bee's Knees. That was the drink I had when I was there just a couple weeks ago. Wonderful, wonderful drink. Whether it's brunch, whether it's date night, whether it's just hop on over there, jackscafe.com.
Before or after games as well, there's an 11 o'clock kick week 2. Great. It'll be a perfect afternoon. Hopefully in September, the patio will be open. It'll be hopping. I'm not sure about the Bee's Knees. I'll take Burnsy's word for it. Just another weird drink that I've never heard of. But the nice thing is they also have beer, which I like. So as we always say, something for everyone at Jack's Cafe. Make your reservations at jackscafe.com, jaxcafe.com. We're in the wrong business, guys. We are on the wrong side of college sports. We are commenting on college sports. We should have been in college sports, especially now that billions of dollars are changing hands, whether it's the athletes, the coaches, the administrators, and now the general managers. What is a general manager? Well, they kind of run everything. They kind of are the old director of football operations. We talk about the University of Minnesota one a lot on this show. His name's Garrett, kind of PJ's right-hand man. But Courtney Morgan is with Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. He leveraged some interest in USC to earn an average of $825,000 annually, according to ESPN here, a deal that bolsters his place as college football's highest paid front office figure. He was the GM for Washington, and now he's making $825 million. He made $500 in his initial contract with Alabama.
825. If he's making $825 million, he should go buy a country somewhere.
Did I say that? I'm reading. Yeah. This is my Edina education. I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. It's not and think at the same time. But he got to Tuscaloosa. They were paying him $500,000. They haven't done anything on the field yet, and he's already got a raise. It's good being at the top of college football. And now the general manager, a term that we didn't even know about in college sports until like 4 or 5 years ago, is now making almost $1 million.
And this is why I have little sympathy when schools tell us that how are we ever going to pay the players the $21 million, the athletes the $21 million that's going to is it next year? I think fall of 2025.
Yep.
Is when it's going to start. When you look at administrative costs in terms of salaries, staffing, those things, positions that they've added, general manager, I think that's a relatively in the last 5 to 7 years, maybe 10 years, where used to be just a professional thing. Now it's trickled down to college where the big programs have general managers. But it's going to be interesting how, I think even the Alabama AD during the SEC meetings was talking about, man, this is going to be a lot of money to have to come up with to pay athletes now. Well, they have it because they're adding positions and they're adding big salaries. So, I'm not going to have a lot of sympathy for those kind of quotes.
Yeah, here at Minnesota, I would tell you, I think what Courtney Morgan does at Alabama versus what Garrett Chernoff does here at Minnesota, it's a little bit different. Garrett kind of oversees everything and kind of wears 400 different hats. Yep. I think Courtney's more on the director of player personnel side, which is what Marcus Hendrickson does here at Minnesota. Now, boys, I would tell you, Minnesota for both of those positions is nowhere close to $825,000. And I'd have a hard time seeing them get anywhere near close to that, but that's going to be the next thing in college football. And that's what Fleck talked about at Big Ten Media Days, is whether it's been facilities, whether it's been, just adding staff. The next era is going to be ramping up your personnel staff. Because when you're going to have this additional potentially 8 figures to pay players, and scholarships or whatever the roster you want to call now is going from 85 to 105, that's where those guys are going to be so important in evaluations. And that's where I'll die on the hill of it someplace like Minnesota. You don't have to be the best recruiter, but you better be the best evaluator. You have to be able to hit on so many players, and that's where the personnel department has to continue to get more efficient.
Well, and Mark Coyle, I saw was quoted again, I think is in our paper.
The Minnesota Star Tribune?
The Minnesota, the Minnesota Star
big change. It's a big change. I was stunned. That was a big rebrand. The Minnesota Star Tribune. But anyway, go ahead.
That they're going to talking about hiring a general manager. I don't know if it's for
cap management.
Yeah, the cap man for the entire department, but to figure out, okay, who's going to get that allotment of the $21 million? How's it going to go? Is it going to be up to, is PJ and Garrett or Marcus Hendrickson going to do that? But when you think about now, like Burnsie, and it's better than anyone, like used to be like your personnel people just evaluate high school kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you got to evaluate probably the portal, players on other rosters, much like a pro personnel department does, because You know, you got to know if you need to make it. Not that they're making trades, but when guys hit the portal, you have to know. You have to be able to make
you got to be on top
here.
of it, especially at a place like Minnesota.
Yeah, because you know, you have to make the evaluation whether he fits, and then by the way, have your other general manager come in and say, "Here's how much money we can give to that player." You know, as part of this 21. It's a lot more. Yeah, it's so much more complicated now than versus, hey, let's go recruiting and try to find some players to bring into the program.
20 years ago with Glenn Mason, it was a lot different.
Yeah, exactly. Like let's go find the 3 most important people in this player's life, and have some peach cobbler in their living room, and talk about the great education they can get at the University of whatever. And now it's different. I saw it down in Iowa City. Is it Seth Wallace, Burnsie? Is that one of their guys?
Yeah.
He's apparently kind of going to take over the GM role, whatever it is. And he was talking about how
I think it's Tyler Barnes for what you're talking about.
It's Tyler Barnes. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm. You can tell reading comprehension a strong suit for me today, but he was talking about, whoever it was talking about that he's already kind of done a dry run for next year's Iowa salary cap and what they think the money is going to be. The 105, that are going to be able to do it with the limitations. And he's basically like, well, we got like 130 kids on our team right now. So 25 of them aren't going to be here. And he just talked about how he's already doing those calculations, the rough estimates, and it's going to be wild to see what comes of all of that.
But the problem with this is until they get clarity on Title IX, how are they going to know what their pool of money is? Because if this $21 million falls under the Title IX restrictions or the legislation, then half's going to women's sports and half are going to men. That's a big deal. I mean, that is going to dictate how much you can spend. But the more you read and hear, I think there's going to be challenges to that quickly in court. And if it is, so much more is going to go. What did we say, Burnsie, last time? You think 70% would go to football?
Which would put you somewhere around 14, 15 million if we're making estimations there.
Yeah. So, and then the rest would divvy up. However, the general manager of the athletic department decides that 8 million, 7 million goes to the rest of the teams. But
what's your favorite quote, Tipper?
He's getting forlorn here.
Well, it's just like if you're a coach, and this is why I think we see coaches getting out of the business or going to the NFL or just retiring. This just seems like it's was it who was the coach? Oh, Mike Gundy. Did you see that? I saw a video of him the other day saying, "Stop calling us about NIL. It's over. We're in camp. We're not dealing with NIL." Like he's But this is, I don't think you can do that. This is something that you have to manage year round, right? Like the transactional part of this is just, I'm old. I know. It's still hard for me to get my head around sometimes. Like this is the new reality. I'm sorry. Yeah. It's just hard to,
I understand. Sometimes. Yeah. And along those lines where I wanted to go next, and speaking of Mike Gundy, did you see how Oklahoma State is hoping to boost some of their NIL efforts? This was the other.
I did. I can't wait for you to explain this to Chip.
All right. Well, they are, because I have to click off of this so I can read it. I'm not going to be able to see his face, which I'm disappointed on. You mentioned it, Chip, that Gundy said he hopes his players can focus on football now instead of the business side of NIL with the season opener just a few days away. However, Oklahoma State announced on Tuesday that the Cowboys will sport QR codes on their helmets, linking to a donation page for the school's NIL fund.
Well, it'd be easy.
Now, Chip, you don't know how to do a QR code.
I don't know how to do it. Yeah, I have
that doesn't affect you. We learned that at Jack's Cafe last year when we had our week zero.
Just bring me the menu. Like I want to hold the menu. I want to be able to turn it over and look at it. I don't want to have to scroll through a phone.
So I have a lot of questions on the QR code, Burnsie, because it's on the back of the helmet. So can you get to it off of television? Do you have to be next to the player? Like, is it for each specific player that gets their own NIL code? Like, there's so many questions. Now I'll say this, as stupid as I think this is, and I understand NIL is everything, so I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm more like you, Chip. Like, it's frustrating as an old school guy who loves the romance of the whole deal.
Yes.
That even as naive as I may be on it, that this is kind of where we are. I will say I am for, in this new world, any creative way, as stupid as it sounds, to try to boost awareness of it, to try to, I don't know, a guy has 12 bush lights in the parking lot, wants to give $1,000 in his QR code. Like, who knows? That might be a game changer for him. I am for every creative way to try to figure out how to do this, as annoying as it is that it literally is coming down to fans and boosters having to foot the bill for a lot of this stuff at the moment. But I think it's a great idea just to get and it at least shows your players and your program and your possible recruits, we're trying out here.
Yeah,
like, we're doing our best to try to take care of you under the new guidelines and everything that comes with it.
I think the funny part is going to be if, like, Oklahoma State makes a big play, a touchdown, interception, whatever it may be, instead of them doing some kind of weird celebration, they're just going to turn around to the camera and start pointing at their back of their head.
Absolutely.
100% that's going to happen.
Make a big play and, like, tipping culture in America. It's going to be like, well, would you like to see another? Just point to the back of your head. It's just going to be. I mean, I like the innovation with it. I like the theory behind it. I also, to the point both of you have made, the romance is just college sports and college football is so different than it was 5, 10, 20 years ago now. It's just, to your point, Gundy can now look to his players and say, I'm trying, but it's also like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, that's right. Well, you wonder, like, the fact that he brought that up, because he said their agents are calling them wanting more money or whatever. It's like, how much does that become something that filters into a locker room and becomes a distraction, becomes an issue,
we'll find out.
Yeah, I mean,
Texas A&M over the last 3 years with
spending
all their NIL money on these 5-star freshmen, and then the starters are not getting nearly what those guys are. I can tell you from what I've heard, that played a big part in why it never worked out. Down there for Jimbo Fisher there was a division within the locker room about that type of stuff.
But it's hard though. Like if that's what you have to do in recruiting. You have to, if you're getting 5-star guys, you're going to have to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is going to be it was like the old NFL model where the quarterback would get $1 trillion before he played it down, in the NFL. And it's like, that's kind of a messed up model.
Backwards. Yeah. Well, and I've told you, I think I'm convinced there's about 50 coaches that don't really even coach their teams all that much anymore. They just spend time all week talking to agents and talking to player reps and talking to other coaches about how are they going to get NIL, just in talking to coaches that I know, it's like weekly, daily conversations are being had about this while they're in the season. Like, they're getting ready to go play a Big Ten rival or a Pac-10 rival, rest in peace. And they've got agents in their office or parents calling them. It's just it's wild, but that's what it is though. But all this money's coming in, coaches are getting it too. And I get it.
The GM.
The GM's getting it. I understand that people are like, well, we still want to keep our jobs. We still like coaching. It's like, but you know what? As unfair as that might be, when you make that kind of money, you got to deal with a lot of crap that other people don't necessarily deal with. And that is why some of the older guard, there's a reason why Nick Saban's on College Game Day now. He doesn't want to be talking to agents on Tuesday when he's trying to get his blitz package ready for LSU. That's not what he wants to do. That's not what he did for 50 years. So he doesn't need to do it. He can go with Miss Terry and hang out in their lake home and then parachute in and talk on College Game Day and wear the sport coat and be Nick Saban. I don't blame him. I don't blame him for not, look at basketball. Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, Jay Wright. Jay Wright probably had 15 more years. I mean, he's younger than those guys. And even he was like, I'm good. I'll just be an ambassador to Villanova. I'm handsome. Everybody loves me. I'll go be Jay Wright. I don't need to talk to you on a Wednesday when I'm trying to – I got to battle Dan Hurley, the psycho that is Dan Hurley, and Dan talk to these agents. Like, I don't want to do any of that. So I don't blame him. I don't blame him. But a week from Thursday, it all begins. The romance of college football, the band, the tailgating, the ambiance, and tickets are available for $30 at gophersports.com. Anything else in our final minute or so, guys, we want to touch on?
Chip, are you going to be grinding out the Nevada Week 0 game on Saturday against SMU?
I will not be. I don't think.
He's not even a college football junkie anymore.
There's nothing more pure than Nevada and SMU on CBS Sports Network or whatever.
Well, it gets more pure if you want to talk about Hawaii versus Delaware State.
Yeah, and that's on like Flow channel auxiliary 2. Like, I don't think I have that in my streaming package.
I don't think I'm paying for that one.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to have to catch the highlights of that one. But although I did remember how the Gophers needed Hawaii to either win or lose last year.
Oh, who could forget? I stayed up until about 1:30 in the morning sweating.
You guys were up.
All of us were checking out if the Gophers were going to have the highest APR score with a 5-7 team. We needed somebody else to be bowl eligible or not get bowl eligible.
We needed a kicker to make like a 51-yard field goal after he missed like 2 30-yarders, and he did it. And it was who could forget?
We all should have questioned our life choices at that point and maybe made some different decisions, but we're all still here for another season of the Parent and Spare podcast. We'll see you both at the State Fair in the next week or so, and we'll talk next week and do a little bit more of a deep dive into North Carolina and the season as a whole. Have a great weekend, everybody. Don't forget, subscribe to the Parent and Spare podcast, however you get your favorite podcast. Leave a rating, leave a review, tell a football fan friend in your life that we are here. Also, don't forget about our YouTube page. It's also just the Parent and Spare YouTube page. And check us out. Subscribe to that as well. We've been growing that thing over the last couple of months, which we appreciate everybody jumping on with that. All you young people out there streaming us on your phones, we appreciate it. And also don't forget about our great partner, Jack's Cafe. Great spot before or after games, great spot for date night, great spot for whatever occasion in your life. They've got something for everybody. Jack's Cafe, JAXcafe.com. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next week on the Parent and Spare podcast.